Traders, how are you? Marcello, founder of the Day Trading Academy. Today we're doing the recap of the coronavirus apocalypse. I do hope that you are safe. I do hope that you are well. This kind of crept up. I don't think anybody in the world kind of anticipated this to happen. But either case, this is I uploaded a video. I don't know if you guys saw it this week. The case for trading. You know, if you guys have been in real estate or if you've been in any other kind of business, right now you wouldn't be able to do any of those businesses. But if you learn how to day trade, you do it properly, you could still be working right now because the markets have not closed. Overall for the week on Monday, the U.S. stocks were lower. The U.S. Congress failed to pass the stimulus bill to save the U.S. economy. That's why we had the bit of a dip. The Fed also provided news that it's going to have an unlimited asset purchases to be able to support the destabilizing economy. And all of the equity gains now that we had during President Trump are now completely gone. On Tuesday, the U.S. stocks surged higher on the hope of the passing of the massive stimulus bill, which eventually did happen on Friday. The Dow shattered the record for most points gained in a day, set at 1,985 on March 13th. It also had its best percentage day since 1933. The S&P also rose 9.4%. The Nasdaq rose 8.1% on Tuesday. Wednesday stocks were mostly mixed due to the Senate approving the $2 trillion aid package to help buttress the economy. And Thursday, we did end higher, even though we had the weekly jobless claims coming in below investors' worst fears. But we did have the case for more stimulus to combat the coronavirus pandemic, since everything is literally just shutting off. On Friday, we ended lower. We officially exited the bear market territory on Thursday with the Dow gaining 21% in 3 days. The index is still on track for its best week since 1938. The broader S&P 500 shaped up to be its best week since 2009. And for the week, the Dow is up 12.84%, down 24.18% for this year. The S&P 500 is up 10.23%. For the year, it's down 21.34%. The Nasdaq up 12.30%, and for the year, it's down 16.39%. In overseas market news, most of the markets kind of follow the direction of the U.S. markets, especially since most other economies in the world were saying that they were going to go ahead and provide unlimited amount of stimulus as well to be able to go ahead and help the world economy and their own national economies as well. The Euro markets are higher, with the DAX and Germany being the biggest winner at 7.88%. Latin America and Canada mostly higher. Colombia this week actually announced their own government stimulus, so that was the biggest winner at 24.78%. Africa and the Middle East were mixed. Egypt is the biggest winner at 7.67%. And then in the Far East, Asia and Australia, the Nikkei in Japan went up by 17.13%. The Philippines went up 10.21%. Not a lot of news in Bitcoin and cryptos this week. It went down 2.83%. Bitcoin ended up at 6,667 with 67 cents. In finance and banking news, the Fed, the central bank in the United States, is actually hiring BlackRock, which is the world's largest money manager, to be able to help with their debt buying programs on their behalf, meaning that the government hired them to be able to help them with their debt buying programs, because they're not only going to buy government debt and public debt, they're also going to start new facilities, including 2 new facilities. They're going to provide liquidity to corporate borrowers, as well as purchases of agency commercial mortgage-backed securities. So essentially the government's just going to buy everything. It's not going to end well, guys, just so you know. U.S. Treasury yields are at a record low on Wednesday, hitting negative rates for some of them. It's the first time in American history that investors are seeing the negative rates in the U.S. bond market, as a lot of investors try to flee to safety. On Friday, the House passed the historic $2 trillion coronavirus relief package, provides hundreds of billions of dollars for industries, small businesses, unemployed workers, healthcare providers that are hit hardest by the coronavirus pandemic, which is devastating economies all around the world. And the U.S. Fed's balance sheet now is set to explode by more than $500 billion over the past week. It's roughly 2 times the pace of the next largest weekly expansion, which was during the global financial crisis in 2008-2009. And the total assets held by the central bank now topped $5 trillion for the first time, as they're attempting to keep credit flowing to all corners of the market, including treasuries, commercial paper, and municipal bonds as well. Japan, the Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is promising unprecedented measures to be able to keep the third largest economy, Japan, afloat. He's announced that they're going to have fiscal stimulus, monetary steps, and also tax breaks to be able to help them. And also said that he was close to launching a national emergency as infections surge. And in commodities, crude continued to go down on top of the huge drop that we saw last week. U.S. crude went down 4.23% to $21.71. It's down over 64% in 2020. International Brent went down 8.7%. To $24.82. It's down 57.22% in 2020. Tumbling demand due to the coronavirus. As you guys know, everybody seems to be in quarantine. Today, actually, Trump has said that he's considering locking down New York and some other places to be able to try to stop the surge of the coronavirus. Russia also announced that they're going to close their borders except for any freight traffic. Saudi Arabia is the de facto leader of OPEC, and due to the fact that Saudi Arabia launched a price war with Russia, due to the fact that Russia didn't want to accept a cut in production, they're going to start producing a ton of oil starting April 1st. So the expectation for oil is that's going to continue to go down. The Russian ruble is at its lowest level versus the USD in 4 years. That's a little bit too far. Let's do it a little bit closer. And so Russia's actually, in a way, they've been benefited by the strong dollar due to the fact that they're actually able to produce oil at a much lower price now because the dollar has gone up against their currency. So meaning that they're going to be able to ride out this price war with Saudi Arabia for a little bit longer. Investors are rushing to buy 100-ounce bars of gold as the coronavirus is starting to disrupt the supply chain for the physical metal. Supplies for gold on sale in the U.S. have plummeted, with higher demand for gold and silver, even though the UK still has a lot of supply left. Other than that, the gold went up 8.67 for the week, up 1,629, and silver went up 14.49% to about $14.53. It went up from $12.69. Other than that, in political news, Maduro, the de facto president of Venezuela, is effectively converted Venezuela into a criminal enterprise. They've been servicing drug traffickers and terrorist groups. He and his allies have stole billions from their own country in South America. And just don't forget that's a socialist paradise for those of you guys that are thinking about going socialist, how that always ends up. The U.S. Justice Department is charged several indictments against the embattled socialist leader and his inner circle, giving up to $15 million reward for Maduro and up to $10 million for some of his cronies in the government. Not the government, excuse me, the military. DEA agents on Friday remanded in custody a retired Venezuelan General Cliver Alcala as he agreed to work with prosecutors, and leaders from G20 nations after an emergency meeting on Thursday said that they're going to commit $5 trillion to the global economy to do whatever it takes to overcome the coronavirus pandemic, as they pledge to continue to conduct bold and large-scale fiscal support. In economic news, the St. Louis Fed president, if you guys don't know, the central bank has different offices around the United States. This is one of them. So that president, his name is James Bullard. He's expecting an unprecedented 50% drop in GDP with 30% drop the unemployment hitting 30%. So he's expecting a 50% drop in GDP, and he's seeing unemployment hitting 30% in coming months due to the shutdown in the coronavirus. If the projection proves accurate, joblessness is going to be actually worse than the Great Depression and 3 times worse than the global financial crisis in 2008-2009. How about those apples? March business activity has largely collapsed as well in Australia, Japan, and Western Europe at a record pace as measures to contain the coronavirus devastate the world economy. The data for the United States is expected to be just as dire once the information is released. Trump administration is considering easing social distancing guidelines as early as next week as his advisors and business leaders push the president to boost the economy. He says, and I quote, "We're not going to let the cure be worse than the problem," as he said in a press briefing on Monday. He also echoed an earlier tweet saying America will again and soon be open for business. It won't be that long. Last week, unemployment claims were at 238,000. This week, the number spiked to 3.28 million. Indicates that there's a lot more people that are losing their jobs as previously thought. And the lack of the urgency of Congress to pass the $2 trillion rescue package actually made matters worse. In corporate news, a huge boost from digital business and further growth in North America. Nike reported their quarterly earnings and sales topped analyst expectations, sent the shares surging 11.09%. The firm also says that it's going to follow its playbook established by the firm in China as it looks to recover its business in other parts of the world. And China is also reopening its economy after months of lockdown. Apple's factories are largely open as well. The question is anybody out there going to buy their phones, which are mostly the same as the previous versions? Let's be honest, right? Other than that, CEO of Google, Sundar Pichai, stating on Friday that he's going to donate $800 million in funds to be able to go towards medical supplies to fight COVID-19 and also in ad credits for government health organizations and businesses. In consumer and trade news, consumers globally are still loading up on food stocks, and the economic fallout from the virus is just starting. Remember, I told you guys that I think this is probably going to go on until May or June. June is when we'll start to see everything start to open again. Other than that, there's a specter of more trade restrictions that can end up causing more harm than good, as a lot more countries now are starting to close off their borders and not allow the exportation of their foods. So this is starting to be a global problem as well. In technology, NASA on Friday picked a new space capsule from Elon Musk's SpaceX to ferry cargo and supplies to the space station. It's a crucial building block in what they want to do to build a permanent post on the moon to be able to mount new futures to Mars, new missions to Mars. In investment news, in a poll of 119 U.S. firms conducted in mid-March by the American Chamber of Commerce in China, only 22% of companies surveyed said that they've resumed normal business operations. 25% said that they're expecting to be there by the end of April, and 50% are experiencing significant revenue declines, and over half say that they expect the 2020 revenues to fall this year if we don't return to usual levels by the end of April. Even though the sample size is small, it looks like some of the claims that 90% of the manufacturing companies and over 60% of the service firms are back to work is mostly a false claim. Profits for the companies in the S&P 500 is set to fall 10% from quarter two a year ago. It's the first double-digit drop since the 16% plunge in quarter-over-quarter profits in quarter three of 2009, just as the U.S. was bottoming out of the Great Recession. In international events, Spain's coronavirus lockdown extended Thursday. They said that they're going to extend it until April 2nd. They're the second hardest hit in all of Europe after Italy. They've lost 738 lives, and now in total, on Wednesday they lost that many. In total, they're at over 4,000. Canada's government objected to Trump reportedly reportedly putting a plan to deploy fewer than 1,000 troops on the border, calling it unnecessary because of the coronavirus outbreak and warning that it might damage relations between the two countries. And the U.S. has now officially surpassed China and Italy with the most coronavirus cases. If you do want to believe the numbers coming out of China, the number of U.S. cases surpassed 100,000 while the death toll exceeded 1,500. Chinese city of Wuhan is also starting to get back to normal as they're opening up the borders and also the metro stations to allow people to be able to get back to business. And in unusual facts, on Tuesday, Japan and the Olympics Committee decided to delay this year's Tokyo Games until 2021 due to the coronavirus outbreak. And this is the first time in the modern 124-year history that they have had to postpone the Olympics, even though they were canceled several times during the World Wars, the two World Wars in the 20th century. Prince Charles, a 71-year-old heir to the British throne, is tested positive for the coronavirus. His wife, the Duchess of Cornwall, these fancy names, Duchess of Cornwall, has also been tested but does not have the virus. And British Prime Minister Boris Johnson tested positive for the coronavirus. He has mild symptoms and he's going to self-isolate in Downing Street. And Johnson will remain in charge of the government's handling of the crisis. That's the news for this week, guys. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Don't forget #AskMarcello for all the questions. We'll see you next week.